Much of it was admitted by his counsel before Mr. David Jones QC in his response to the complaint dated June the 7th, 2021. It was all summarized by Mr. Jones in his report, which he has had since June 14, 2021. There is very little evidence in dispute. Most of the relevant evidence is also entirely within the knowledge of Mr. Norn.
Mr. Barclay, I hate to interrupt, but we're getting a message.
You're very good at interrupting, Mr. Perry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Norn, I apologize, but I need to give direction to whoever is making it public. We need to start again with Mr. Barclay's judgment. Your judgment was not read publicly.
Seriously?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What? Are we clear on that, Ms. Anderson?
Can you guys not get your crap together? Seriously?
Okay, we have a message now that it's all clear. Could you begin again, Mr. Barclay?
Yes, Mr. Norn, just bear with me. I was delivering my judgment, but I understand from the officials that for whatever reason, it wasn't being made public, so I'm going to repeat it. I just got nicely started. The subject matter of the inquiry is serious because it affects Mr. Norn's reputation and career. However, the evidence itself is not complicated and largely uncontroverted. Much of it was admitted by his counsel before Mr. David Jones QC in his response to the complaint dated June the 7th, 2021. It was all summarized by Mr. David Jones in his report, which he has had since June the 14th, 2021. There is very little evidence in dispute. Most of the relevant evidence is also entirely within the knowledge of Mr. Norn. In that regard, my counsel advises me that Mr. Norn, when he was questioned under oath on September 22nd, 2021, he refused to answer any questions relevant to my terms of reference objected to by Mr. Cooper. Transcripts that were provided to Mr. Cooper were very brief and could be read by counsel in an evening. I did. As I did. It is unfortunate that Mr. Cooper has diverted his own attention and devoted significant time and effort sending 19 lengthy pieces of correspondence which had nothing to do with the issues and required my counsel to take significant time to respond. As respectfully submitted, if Mr. Cooper had directed his focus to the evidence as it was presented to him, it would have assisted in his preparation. As I mentioned yesterday, as a result of Mr. Cooper's application alleging institutional bias, this involved a very complex legal argument and took considerable time to prepare, and it included 4 lengthy affidavits, which included a lengthy affidavit from his client, Mr. Norn. It is so clear that the disclosure provided to Mr. Cooper was both fulsome and timely, and in no way is he prejudiced. In my view, this is not a difficult case if counsel were properly focused, as the evidence is not complex and generally not in dispute. I therefore conclude that Mr. Cooper and his client are not prejudiced, and I deny him the application for an adjournment. In closing, Mr. Cooper's suggestion that the date for this hearing was selected and maintained to facilitate the schedule of the legislature and was politically motivated is frankly insulting, is without foundation, and is entirely false.
Are you serious, Mr. Barclay? Seriously? Wow. Wow.
That's my judgment. Great. We're going ahead with the witnesses now.
Okay, Mr. Barclay.
This is like a farce. This is like a legal farce. Seriously.
May I proceed, Mr. Barclay?
Yeah.
Mr. Barclay and Mr. Norn has chosen to join us today, but nonetheless, I want to file an affidavit of service on him of the subpoena to produce documents and testify, and notice of the hearing which commenced yesterday in his absence. And this affidavit of service is by Mr. Kelly Martin of the City of Yellowknife. This affidavit of service, Mr. Barclay, was facilitated thanks to Mr. Cooper's office. He arranged the service on Mr. Norn of these documents, and I would submit that this should be marked as an exhibit.
You can so mark the affidavit as an exhibit.
Okay, what number will this
number?
I believe this is number 16.
16. It'll be marked as exhibit 16.
Mr. Barclay, the first witness is a witness that we are tendering pursuant to your Rule 15A. We have provided an affidavit of his testimony to my friend, Mr. Cooper, and he has requested an opportunity to cross-examine him. We would like to have admitted to the hearing Mr. R.L. Williams, and we'd ask that he be admitted now.
Williams has been admitted.
Mr. Williams and Justice Barclay, we welcome you to our hearing.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning.
I'd like to get you sworn. Ms. Anderson?
Yes, sir. Mr. Williams, would you like to swear or affirm your oath?
Either will do. Swearing's fine.
Do you have a Bible?
In which case, let's affirm.
Okay. Can you state your full name, please?
Oliver Charles Williams.
Do you affirm, Mr. Williams, that the evidence that you will provide this inquiry is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do so affirm.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Williams, I'd like to begin by informing you, as I am obligated by the legislation, that pursuant to Section 8 of the Public Inquiries Act, you do have the right to object to answer any questions under Section 5 of the Canada Evidence Act. The Public Inquiries Act also provides that any witness at an inquiry shall be deemed to have objected to answer any question asked of the witness on the ground that the answer of the witness may tend to incriminate the witness or may tend to establish the liability of the witness to a civil proceeding at the instance of the Crown or any person. But no answer given by a witness at an inquiry shall be used or be admissible in evidence against the witness in any trial or other proceedings against the witness taking place after the inquiry, other than a prosecution for perjury in giving the evidence. Do you understand that?
Understood.
Okay. Mr. Williams, you swore an affidavit dated September the 10th, 2021, correct?
I affirmed it, yes.
Oh, I affirmed it. Thank you very much. And for the record, Mr. Barclay, I'll read the affidavit, which we
Please go ahead.
will be tendering so that those listening can know what we're talking about. Quote, I, Ollie Williams of Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, hereby swear, affirm in your case, the following. 1, I swear and affirm this affidavit under compulsion of subpoena dated July 14th, 2021. A copy of that subpoena is attached to this affidavit and marked as Exhibit A. 2, I am the head of programming and news at Cabin Radio. I have been covering the allegations that Steve Norn had breached the Northwest Territories mandatory self-isolation period in April 2021. 3, on April 23rd, 2021, I had a brief telephone conversation with Mr. Norn. During the conversation, Mr. Norn confirmed he had tested positive for COVID-19 along with a family member. Mr. Norn identified his self-isolation period as having been between April 4th and 18th and stated that he stayed home until going to Taste of Saigon on April 19th. In regard to his compliance with the self-isolation period, Mr. Norn stated, quote, "I stayed home. I followed the rules. I was upfront with everybody," end of quote. Paragraph 4. During the conversation on April 23rd, 2021, Mr. Norn did not mention having gone to the Legislative Assembly on April 17th, 2021, or the Yellowknife Racquetball Club on April 18th, 2021. 5. On April 23rd, 2021, I wrote and caused to be published to the Cabin Radio website, bracket cabinradio.ca, end of bracket, an article titled, quote, "Steve Norn says he and family member are this week's YK cases," bracket, the article, end of bracket. The material parts of the conversation I had with Mr. Norn are accurately produced in the article. A copy of that article is attached and marked as Exhibit B. And you have seen Exhibit B to your affidavit, correct, Mr. Williams?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, I will read your article, Exhibit B to the affidavit of Ollie Williams, dated September 10th, 2021. Headline: Steve Norn says he and his family member are this week's YK cases. Ollie Williams, April 23rd, 2021. Paragraph: Steve Norn, the MLA for Tuna-Willet, says he has tested positive for COVID-19 and a family member also has the disease. They are the two cases identified in Yellowknife this week, he said. Then appears a picture of Mr. Norn receiving a Facebook post on March 26th showing the MLA receiving his first COVID-19 vaccine. Then it continues. Paragraph: Norn told Cabin Radio he received a positive test on Wednesday. He took the test after reading the S.N.W.T Chief Public Health Officer's call for people to be tested when the virus responsible for COVID-19 turned up in a Yellowknife sewage sample. Paragraph: Norn, who lives in Yellowknife, had traveled to the Alberta community of Grand Prairie for a family emergency at the start of April. He said he isolated as instructed from April 4 to 18 before visiting Yellowknife's Taste of Saigon restaurant on April 19, a day after his isolation ended. Paragraph: Once Norn tested positive, that trip to Taste of Saigon triggered an exposure advisory. The Norn family's positive tests also ended up involving the city's École St. Patrick High School, where some 40 contacts have been identified and which sent a letter to parents on Thursday night. And then these items are in quote. Quote, I followed all the rules. I was upfront with everybody, in quotation marks, end of quotations. Norn told Cabin Radio on Friday morning, he said he and his family member were doing well physically, but added he was mentally, quote, mentally exhausted, end of quote. Asked what could have led him to remain infectious beyond the 2-week isolation period, he acknowledged his first thought had been, quote, how the hell did this happen, end of quote. Quote, I did talk to a medical expert, end of quote, Norn said. Quote, they said the variant could stay in your body for 17 days, end of quote. There is currently limited scientific evidence related to the longevity of variants of COVID-19 as most are relatively new and have not been thoroughly studied. Paragraph. The territorial government has not confirmed whether either of this week's 2 cases involve variants of concern. Samples have been sent to labs in southern Canada for analysis. Paragraph. Norn said he was coming forward because he realized residents would have, quote, all kinds of speculation, end of quote, about what had happened. Quote, I stayed home, end of quote, he said, referring to residents' concerns about whether isolation rules have been broken. Quote, after Norn spoke with Cabin Radio's Yellowknife Racquetball Club gym, said there had been potential exposure at the gym on April 18th, the day Norn said his isolation period would have come to an end. Related to the cases involving Norn and his family member, all those involved have been contacted. Paragraph. Norn has received his first shot of Moderna's vaccine against COVID-19, posting a photo of it on March 26th, but not the second, as it is required for full vaccination. Quote, I'm feeling okay, end of quote, he said on Friday. Quote, just a little tired, mentally fried. End of your exhibit as attached to your affidavit. Have I read that correctly, Mr. Williams?
With two exceptions, the pronunciation is Tunaday Willaday, or at least that's the best that I can do in my accent for the MLA's electoral district, and it's the Yellowknife Racket Club, not Racquetball Club. Otherwise, yes.
Thank you. I tender that affidavit, Mr. Barclay, as the next exhibit.
Thank you very much, Mr. LaPrairie. What exhibit number is it?
17.
It'll be marked as Exhibit 17.
Okay, and then now Mr. Williams stands ready for cross-examination.
Mr. Cooper, you can start your cross-examination.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Williams, you had an opportunity to look at your subpoena to produce documents and testify today,
Yes.
and you looked at that the date that you received it,
Yes.
and you produced all of the notes of your discussions with Mr. Norn, did you?
I have brought them with me as instructed in the subpoena.
Okay, so you haven't provided those notes to Mr. LaPrairie?
The subpoena states I should bring them with me.
Okay, and did Mr. LaPrairie ask you to disclose them to him in preparation for his drafting of the affidavit?
To my recollection, yes.
And there's some reason that you didn't give those notes to Mr. LaPrairie?
The subpoena asks that I just bring them with me.
Okay. Sir, if I can just address you for a moment, obviously we don't have those notes, and those are somewhat critical to cross-examination and the circumstances. I'm going to ask that the further cross-examination be delayed long enough for us to see the notes, and I'm not looking for anything more than a couple of hours, but I need those notes to cross-examine this particular witness.
Mr. Williams, are you able to scan a copy of those to us?
I don't have a copy, but to scan, or I don't have a scanner, sorry, but I can forward the email in which I sent those notes to myself to anyone who needs them.
Could you send that to Shauna Sparrow? You have her email?
Yep.
And we will forward those to you, Mr. Cooper, as soon as we receive them. Could you do that now, Mr. Williams?
That is already done.
Okay, and Ms. Cooper,
Just still waiting.
Ms. Sparrow?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're just waiting for receipt of them, and we'll be sending directly to you, Mr. Cooper.
Is there some reason, Mr. LaPrairie, that this wasn't done before?
We had not received the notes, as Mr. Williams said, and frankly, I don't recall asking that they be produced anytime sooner than this. I've never seen them.
Well, it's obvious that you gave some thought to them. I'm not purporting to cross-examine you, Mr. LaPrairie, but obviously gave some thought to them because they're specifically mentioned in the subpoena, and you were very diligent in getting the materials that were mentioned in the subpoena for my client. And I don't see the same diligence in getting the notes that are obviously critical to my cross-examination. And frankly, to your preparation of the
Mr.
affidavit.
Cooper, I'm going to give you an opportunity to read the notes. Nobody's prejudiced, so those remarks really aren't very helpful. We want justice to be served, and you'll have an opportunity to go through the notes and then continue your cross-examination with Mr. Williams.
The notes have been sent to you, Mr. Cooper.
You have them right now. And you think 2 hours is sufficient time, Mr. Cooper?
I have no idea. How many pages are they, Mr. Williams?
There's about, hold on, let me count for you. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines.
10 lines.
I don't even know if they're legible, sir. I suspect they're in handwriting, Mr. Williams.
Nope, they're typed. You will find them
Right.
easy to read.
Okay, great. 2 hours will be sufficient, sir. Thank you.
That's not 2 hours.
You don't need 2 hours, Mr. Cooper, to read 10 lines.
I don't know what I'm
Why
dealing
don't-
with, sir, which has been sort of.
I'm going to give you a half an hour.
Half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll stand adjourned then until 10:30. Mr. Williams, will you stand by?
Certainly, yes.
Okay, 10:30, we will resume public broadcast. Thank you.
This court stands I'm sorry, it's 10:30
thank
on
you.
October 5th. This hearing is resumed.
Yes, you can go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Williams, just before the break, you indicated that you had drafted some notes and you've been provided with an email sent through Ms. Sparrow, and I'll read it into the record. And you tell me if this in fact consists of the entirety of your notes in this regard. It says, subject Norn. It says to Ollie Williams. And I won't read your email. I don't know if that's a matter of public record, but it doesn't really matter, but it's clearly at Cabin Radio. Wednesday positive test. The spelling is somewhat deficient, but I think you're trying to indicate 2 daughters, Grand Prairie, Mr. Williams. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Saw wastewater advisory. My isolation 4th to 18th. Had taste of Saigon after isolation. Have I read that correctly?
You have.
Followed all the rules, period. I was upfront with everyone, period.
Everybody.
Everybody, thank you. How the hell did this happen? Question mark. Next line. I did talk to a medical expert, period. They said the variant could stay in your body for 17 days, period. Mentally exhausted, period. I wish the best for everybody, and I just want my family to be okay, period. There's, I think you're trying to say, going to be all kinds of speculation.
Correct.
Okay, so I've transcribed your sentence correctly then, Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Okay. The next sentence, no, comma, I stayed home, period. Feeling okay, period. Just a little tired, period. Mentally fried, period. And then there's reference to yourself, Ollie Williams, programming and news. Did I accurately read into the record the notes that you have forwarded on to us?
You did.
Okay, now what is the origin of these notes? Did you type them as you were going along and then email them to yourself?
Correct.
And is that your standard operating procedure when you're doing interviews with public representatives?
If not capable of recording it, yes.
And why in this case were you not capable of recording the interview, sir?
To my recollection, I was having a little trouble connecting my cell phone to our recording equipment that morning.
Did you take any notes to that effect, that you were having that difficulty and that's why you couldn't record the interview?
No, it's not uncommon for that to be the case.
Did you take any other notes with respect to this interview?
No.
Did you take any notes in preparation for the interview?
No.
Where did you find Mr. Norn's phone number?
I've had it for years.
And where is it located such that you could access it the day that you called him?
On my cell phone.
And as I understand it, you initiated the call with Mr. Norn that day, which resulted in the interview taking place?
To my recollection, I phoned him at 7:32 that morning and couldn't get him on the phone. He phoned me back at 7:36, which I inadvertently missed because my cell phone is usually on silent before 8 a.m. each day. And I then phoned him back at 7:36 and we connected.
How did the interview start? The first words back and forth between you and Mr. Norn.
I should imagine we greeted each other.
Well, you can imagine as you see fit, but we want to know what you remember. So what do you remember?
No specific recollection about how it began.
Did you identify yourself to Mr. Norton?
Yes.
And how did you do that? Did you just give your name or did you give reference to cabin radio?
Well, he would have phoned me back, as I said, at 7:36, so he would already have been aware of who I was. We'd spoken several times before. I think we had each other's numbers. And I would, of course, introduce myself and said, hello, it's Ollie from Cabin Radio.
That's wonderful. What do you actually remember, Mr. Williams?
I don't recall entirely clearly the exact words I used.
Okay, well, even unclearly, what do you recall the words that you used?
Much the same as what I've just said there.
Okay, so you recall something to the effect of salutations between the two?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that was on the third call attempt. That was you calling Mr. Norn, not vice versa, correct?
Correct. Me calling him for the second time after he had called me.
And am I correct in understanding that you presumed that he knew who you were when you called?
I would presume that, but I would also take care to identify myself when calling an elected official.
And did you in fact do that? Did you take care to identify yourself when you contacted Mr. Norn that morning?
To my recollection, yes.
What do you mean to your recollection? You remember it or you don't?
Well, yes, I remember doing so.
Okay. And how would you have identified yourself? Ollie Williams what?
I imagine I would have said Ollie from Cabin Radio.
You imagine that or you recall that?
To my recollection, that's what I would have said.
Do you remember using those words, Mr. Williams?
To the best of my memory, yes, those are the words that I recall using.
What else did you say in preparation for your discussion with Mr. Norn?
To the best of my recollection, I recall expressing concern for his well-being and then asking him if now would be an okay time to talk about the statement that he had given.
Did you record anywhere any of that communication?
Nope, that would have been before having asked him if it was all right to begin interviewing him, and therefore I would not have kept notes of that.
Okay. And it's important for you as a journalist, I understand, to identify the purpose of the call before the interview itself begins, correct?
Usually, yes, that is exactly what we would do. In fact, at all times.
And you're certain that you said something like, it's Ollie from Cabin Radio.
I remember doing that, yes.
And I want to interview you with respect to what?
To the statement that he had provided regarding COVID-19 and his being one of the cases.
Did you tell him that?
I cannot remember exactly what I would have said.
You didn't take any notes about that?
No.
What did Mr. Norn say in response to your desire to interview him on that issue?
He gave me permission to go ahead. I recall that.
What exactly did he say?
I don't know.
You recall some generic positive response indicating that he would voluntarily participate in the interview?
Yes.
Is there some reason why you didn't write any of that information down?
It would not have been information we would have intended quoting.
But it's important information preparatory to collecting information from a public official, correct?
Well, if the official had declined an interview, that would have been reflected in the absence of one.
Okay. And Mr. Norn didn't decline the interview?
No.
And in fact, from your recollection, he actually tried to call you back after he missed your call.
Correct.
And it's important to Cabin Radio always to be accurate and fair in their reporting, correct?
Of course.
Your article includes a fair number of quotes, as we've heard Mr. LaPrairie read into the record. You'd agree with that statement?
Yes.
And everything which is in quotes, presumably, is verbatim.
Yes.
It's the purpose of quotes in a written report such as this, correct?
Correct.
And that's to separate out your comments and your paraphrasing from the exact words of the interviewee, correct?
Correct.
The first quote in your article, sir, is, and it's in quotes, I followed all the rules, comma, I was upfront with everybody. That's right? That's the first quote in your article?
I would need to reread the article, but I believe that to be the case. Would you like me to reread the article?
Well, just follow along, because we're going to be going through each of the quotes. So if you can have that in front of you, sir, that will help in the cross-examination.
Certainly, then yes.
And you base that on the notes that you took that I just read into the record.
Correct.
You then go on to quote Mr. Norn as saying, mentally exhausted. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you remember him using that exact phrase?
I do, and it's in the notes.
What was the rest of that sentence? Did Mr. Norn just say, mentally exhausted?
As I recall, yes. I can't recall the question I had asked him from that, but I do recall him using those words and pausing.
It sort of raises another issue. We don't know to what he is responding because you haven't recorded any of your questions, right?
That's correct.
Is that your standard operating procedure as a reporter?
Yes.
You don't record the questions, just the answers.
Yes.
That doesn't cause you any problem understanding the context of the answers?
Not when writing immediately after an interview, no.
So you're relying on your memory in terms of what the questions were, but you're relying on your notes with respect to the answers. Is that right?
Correct.
But if you're writing the report immediately after the interview, why are you not then content to rely on your memory with respect to quoting the person that you've just interviewed?
It's always best to have an extra layer of security.
Both with questions and answers, correct?
With the answers.
Would not best practices in your journalistic experience be to record the questions and the answers?
I would prefer to focus on the accuracy of the answers, as those are what we intend quoting.
So the phrase as quoted in your notes and then again in the article, mentally exhausted. But what's the context of that answer?
The context of that answer, as I recall, is that I had asked how he and his family member would do.
Best of your recollection.
Yes.
Might be accurate, might not be. Right?
Sorry, was that a question?
Might be accurate, might not be.
I'm quite confident in my recollection of that.
Is somebody else in the room with you right now, Mr. Williams?
The doorbell just went.
Okay. Nobody else in the room?
No.
Mentally exhausted. He could have been referring to his daughter, right?
As I recall, he was referring to himself,
But no notes.
other than the ones in front of you.
Yeah, no, you don't recall specifically what you questioned him about. Which is
Not now, no.
Right.
Well, I mean, other than what I just told you.
Right. He could have been talking about Tricia Smith, with whom he had been traveling, right?
I don't know who that is. I recall asking him how he and his family member were doing.
Okay. And to the best of your recollection, mentally exhausted. Your answer, sir?
Yes.
Okay. We
Sorry, I'm a little distracted by that doorbell continuing to go.
Okay. I understand. But understand as well that we have a transcript being produced which requires generally a statement rather than an affirmative or negative headline.
They are now knocking on the door. They're quite persistent.
Well, we'll try to be just as persistent.
Hold on a minute. I'm in a public inquiry! Carry on, sir.
Okay, well. The next quote that you have is, how the hell did this happen? Do you see that about halfway down the page?
How the hell did this happen? Yes.
Yeah. So to what question was Mr. Norn responding such that it elicited that quoted statement?
As I recall, I asked what could have led him to remain infectious beyond the 2-week isolation period, as he had stated.
Okay, so that's your best guess as to what the question was.
Well, it helps that in the article we write, and I'll quote, asked what could have led him to remain infectious beyond the 2-week isolation period. He acknowledged his first thought had been, quote from Steve, how the hell did this happen, end quote.
But in your notes, you'll see that how the hell did this happen is preceded by 2 previous statements that don't appear with that quote in that location. How is it that you were able to determine what he was referring to by isolating one of the 3 sentences?
Because I wrote this article within 10 minutes of the phone call concluding, and at the time would have been able to remember clearly what had been a reference to what.
You just don't have that clarity of memory now.
It's been a while. And this at the time, let's be very clear, was not a conversation that was expected to be particularly controversial in any sense.
You didn't expect it to be particularly controversial.
I had no reason to, no.
At the beginning of the interview, did you tell Mr. Norn that his comments were going to be on the record?
Yes.
Did Mr. Norn ask you if you were recording any of the conversation?
Don't recall him asking that.
I just want to go to your affidavit here for a moment. Paragraph 3. Have you got that handy, Mr. Williams?
One moment. Yes,
Okay. You describe the conversation as brief. You see that in the first line?
I do.
What do you mean by that?
About 5 minutes.
From start to finish, from the moment that Mr. Norn picked up the call to the moment you hung up. 5 minutes?
About that, yes.
Paragraph 4, you talk
Am
about...
I just a question for the adjudicator? I note with interest that Steve Norn has just used a comment in the Zoom chat to say the word liar. Are we reading those into the record?
Well, those I'll let the adjudicator deal with it, but I understand that the only people that can see the chat, Mr. Williams, are people that are invited to the very limited jurisdiction of the Zoom call, not members of the public who are accessing it.
Sorry, that was to the adjudicator. What do we do with that?
I'll defer to Mr. Adjudicator if you have any comments, or Mr. LaFrari.
No. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, those statements are highly improper. Perhaps I could ask the clerk, would the public hear those statements?
So the public does not see those.
I don't know if that gives you any comfort, Mr. Williams, but
I mean, I can read them out as we go along.
Sole Adjudicator is concerned are highly improper.
I'll read them into the record as we go.
I'd like you to read them in the record right now.
Steve Norn says liar 30 seconds max. It was more like 5 minutes. Mr. Cooper.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I just want to diverge for a moment onto this issue, Mr. Adjudicator. Mr. Barclay, it would be highly inappropriate for Mr. Williams to be reading in the comments, probably as inappropriate as the comments may be themselves.
Well, it affects him, and it's certainly something public. Fortunately, it hasn't been heard by the public, but I would like you, Mr. Cooper, to admonish your client to not make these statements during the hearing. He'll get an opportunity to testify at a certain stage of the hearings, but he shouldn't be making these comments. It is not helpful. And I'll leave that up to you, you're his counsel, but he should be admonished that these statements should not be made.
Yes, sir. I'm referring, though, to a witness who is under oath, simply making pronouncements outside of the confines of that oath.
I'm reading into the record things that are directly in front of me from your client, sir.
I understand, Mr. Williams. I'm now speaking to the adjudicator, not you. So
Well, let's get back to the cross-examination.
I just don't want to be, if Mr. Norn...
No, I've heard you, but let's get back to the cross-examination.
If Mr. Williams can be directed to listen to the questions and not spend any time looking at the chat, it's inappropriate for a witness to be diverted by other documents when they're under cross-examination and under oath.
I agree.
Okay, so it may be the best thing to do, Mr. Williams, to turn off your chat so that it isn't distracting and we can get through the remainder of the cross-examination.
Sadly, the chat pops up automatically at the bottom of the screen, regardless of what I do, so it's more under Steve Norn's control than mine, Mr. Cooper.
Sir, I'm just going to ask for 5 minutes to speak with my client, if I might.
You'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
This court stands down for 5 minutes. I'm sorry, this hearing stands down for 5 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
10:55. This hearing is resumed.
Thank you, sir. Speaking with those more technologically proficient than I understand that the moderator or the host should be able to shut off the chat. I appreciate that there's been some administrative discussions that have been taking place on the chat, and I suggest we find a different forum to avoid the distraction to this or other witnesses that could be caused. Any one of the currently 11 participants can now contribute and read the chat, as opposed to those watching more publicly on the YouTube channel, as I understand we're on Twitter and maybe some other platforms. Is that possible, sir?
Well, we'll look into it. I understand your concern, and we'll look into it. But let's get on to the cross-examination.
Mr. Williams, you understand you're still under oath?
Oh, yes.
Or affirmation, as the case may be. We were just about to touch upon paragraph 4 of your affidavit. Got a chance to look that over? You heard Mr. LaPrairie read it in earlier today.
Yes.
Now, it's an odd thing to say what somebody didn't say. So, did you ask Mr. Norn if he had gone to the Legislative Assembly, as you say, on April 17, 2021?
Not at that time, no.
Did you ask Mr. Norn if he had been to the Yellowknife Racket Club on April 18, 2021?
Not at that time, no.
There's lots of things you didn't ask Mr. Norn that could have been included in this paragraph, I suppose. I'm confused by that paragraph. Do you know that Mr. Norn went to the Legislative Assembly on April 17, 2021?
That's not a matter for me. I think that's a matter for the people who would be able to testify to that.
Well, I kind of agree. I'm just kind of curious as to this affidavit. Who drafted this affidavit for you, Mr. Williams?
It was drafted with the help of several people.
Well, who specifically drafted this affidavit that is one of the exhibits, number 7?
My affidavit, I've affirmed it.
I understand that. Who drafted it for you, Mr. Williams?
I don't think that particularly matters, sir. It's my affidavit. It carries my name.
You answer the question, please.
It's my affidavit. It carries my name. As far as the court should be concerned, I drafted it.
So you're saying under oath that you drafted the affidavit that is Exhibit 17?
I'm saying it carries my name, and I wholeheartedly concur with every statement within it.
That's all I need, Mr. Cooper.
Well, sir, an affidavit, when drafted by somebody other than the deponent, can have several influences. And it's not an unusual or unfair question to ask who actually drafted it. And I'm asking the witness to answer the question.
Well, he has. He said he acknowledges the material in it and it's true, and he's affirmed.
So he's
That's all I need.
He's affirmed the content, sir, but he has not answered the question.
I've made my ruling.
So your ruling, sir, is I can't ask him who drafted the affidavit.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. You, sir, Mr. Williams, are bound by a certain journalistic code of ethics, correct?
Yes.
And when we go to the Cabin Radio site, we see in bold letters our commitment to ethical journalism. You're familiar with that portion of the website?
It is linked from every page.
Did you have any hand in contributing to the contents of that part of the webpage?
I did.
And I see that it was last modified as recently as July 24, 2021. Is that consistent with your knowledge?
It is.
Was it a substantial or substantive modification on that date?
No.
So what we see here would have been in effect in April 2021 when you were having these conversations with Mr. Norn, or this conversation.
Oh, yes.
At the time that you had this conversation, this brief conversation as you described it with Mr. Norn, you had an ongoing friendship with Tim Mercer, is that right?
No.
He's not your friend?
No.
You don't do anything socially with Mr. Mercer?
No.
Was there any aspect of the interview that in hindsight you recognize might have breached your obligation as contained in this document to avoid conflicts of interest?
No.
Those are all of my questions, Mr. Williams. Mr. Perry, I note that you're on mute. I completed my cross-examination of this witness, and I turn the mic over to you. And
I'm sorry, Mr. Cooper. I was on mute. I'm sorry. I was on mute. We were on mute. I apologize. We've been watching that because we've been creating some turbulence and interference, and so we were just on mute. I apologize. I asked Mr. Barclay that the notes that were referred to during the conversation and be marked as during the testimony be marked as the next exhibit.
And I did mark it. It's Exhibit 18, Mr. Cooper.
thank you, sir.
Mr. Williams, I wanted to thank you very much for your testimony, and you're excused.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Now we would admit next witness, Lenny Lammert.
Going to call a witness.
Isn't there one witness in the building or something?
I'm sorry, Ms. Anderson, if we misled you. She, by me admitting to the forum in which we are in now. The witness we want to admit is Lenny Lammert and her counsel, Tess Layton.
I'm sorry, sir. There's no one in the waiting room, and there's no one outside.
I'll just
Okay, well, just take a minute and we know they're standing by.
Just for our records, can we have the spelling of Ms. Lammering's counsel, please?
Yes, first name Tess, T-E-S-S, last name Layton, L-A-Y-T-O-N.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Someone has just gone downstairs to see if perhaps she's here.
No, Ms. Anderson, she will not be there. She is attending by video link.
Have her standing by. I'm sorry.
She's there.
She's there?
Yeah, they're standing by. She just needs to log in.
Oh, she should log in.
Yeah, I just told her.
Yeah. We're in communication with them and they're in the process of logging in.
Oh, do you want this on? And I will just call her. Just to check.
Right.
It's 11:15, and this hearing is resumed.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Barclay, the next witness has submitted an affidavit pursuant to your rules. Witness is Linny Lamberink, Lamberink,
And she's present.
She's present. I'd ask that she be sworn or affirmed.
Ms. Lammert, can you state your name in full, please? You're on mute, ma'am.
How is that?
Much better.
We can hear you now.
To answer the question, my name is Lenia Lambrink.
Would you like to swear or affirm?
Affirm.
Do you affirm that the evidence that you shall provide this inquiry is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lamberink is joined today by Counsel Tess Layton. I'd like to begin the questioning and introduction of your affidavit, Ms. Lamberink, by first issuing you this statement, which I am obliged to do so pursuant to the legislation in Northwest Territories. I'd like to begin by informing you that pursuant to Section 8 of the Public Inquiries Act, you do have the right to object to answer any question under Section 5 of the Canada Evidence Act. The Public Inquiries Act also provides that any witness at an inquiry shall be deemed to have objected to answer any question asked of the witness on the ground that the answer of the witness may tend to incriminate the witness or may tend to establish the liability of the witness to a civil proceeding at the instance of the Crown or any person. And no answer given by a witness at an inquiry shall be used or admissible in evidence against the witness in any trial or other proceedings against the witness taking place after the inquiry, other than a prosecution for perjury in giving of the evidence. You understand that, Ms. Lamberink?
Yep.
Okay. You provided a statutory declaration affirmed on the 31st day of August 2021, correct?
Yep.
I will now read it into the record, and I would ask, after I'm going to ask you if that is correct. I, Linny Lamberink of Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, hereby affirm the following. 1. I make the statutory declaration under compulsion of subpoena, dated July 14, 2021. A copy of that subpoena is attached as Exhibit A. 2. I am a journalist employed by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, bracket CBC, end of bracket. I am one of the CBC journalists who has been covering the allegations that Steve Norn had violated the territory's mandatory isolation rules. Number 3, on or about May 4th, 2021, I had a brief telephone conversation with Mr. Norn. The bulk of that conversation was Mr. Norn trying to negotiate a later date for a formal interview. Toward the end, I informed him I was going to ask one question, which was whether he in fact broken his isolation period after traveling. Mr. Norn admitted he had, but declined to answer further questions, saying he would speak during an interview the following day. Then the conversation ended. I do not have any notes of that interview, but an audio recording of that telephone conversation is attached as Exhibit B. I have not modified Exhibit B in any way, and it is a full and complete recording of the conversation I had with Mr. Norn. 4. Other than the conversation of May 4th, 2021, I have not had any further communication with Mr. Norn. 5. On or about May 5th, 2021, I wrote and caused to be published to CBC's English language website, cbc.ca, an article titled S.N.W.T MLA's Broken Isolation Leads to Lengthy Complaint, bracket, the article, end of bracket. The material parts of the conversation I had with Mr. Norn are accurately reproduced in that article. A copy of that article is attached hereto as Exhibit C. Have I read the text, the body of your affidavit correct, Ms. Lemry?
The name of the article said it leads to an integrity complaint. I heard lengthy complaint, but that may have just been the audio coming through differently. I don't know.
Any other correction to my reading?
No.
Okay. I would like now to refer to the exhibits to your affidavit. You refer to an audio recording as Exhibit B. I would like, Ms. Anderson, for that audio recording to now be played.
Hello?
Hey, is this Steve?
Yes.
Hey, it's Lainey calling again from CBC.
Hey, Lainey.
Hey.
Okay, so here's what I could do for you, okay? I just talked to my family. It's been a very exhaustive day for all of us. If I can, maybe tomorrow, but before lunch, I could give you an interview. I could commit to that. It's just been, like I said, this whole thing's been really, really hard on the family and myself.
Yeah, I know. It's hard, right? Because we haven't really been able to talk with you much about what's happened,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
this
There's
keeps
still
drawing out.
Yeah, there's still some more stuff, more data that's coming out. I want to make sure that I have it, and then that way I'll be very comfortable with what I need to say for tomorrow. So I guess that's what I'm alluding to. I'll wait for that, and then I will speak tomorrow. Does that sound agreeable?
Sorry, did you say there was more data coming out tomorrow?
No. I said I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay.
There's a couple of people I want to hear from first, and some people that I respect, and I just want to make sure that I have all my ducks in a row. And because, like I said, it's been a really emotional day for my family and I again. And this is like day 29 of 8 or whatever being isolated in the last month, and it's been a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And but no, I will call me at this time before lunch, and hopefully I'll have something of substance. But
Okay.
just so I understand just so I'm ready. Like, what kind of questions am I going to be expected to be asked?
Well, I mean, at this point, I just wanted to get a reaction to you. We have a statement from the caucus saying that they're asking or filing a complaint with the Integrity Commissioner. So it was just a request about that. But one question I am going to ask you right now is, did you break your isolation period after traveling?
Oh, for the ledge, yes. Yes, I did.
You did?
I'll wear that, yeah. I'll own that. If I'm going to get fined for that, that's fine. But,
You're being fined?
No. I said I'll take any actions that if the public health want to do something with that, they can't. Like, absolutely, I'll own it. I think people just thinking I'm getting off scot-free, but they're still doing their investigating and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm saying it's tough for me to comment.
Okay.
I gotta let the people do their job. So that's why I wanted. That's another thing too. So, but yeah, I could chat more tomorrow.
Can you explain to me how you broke your isolation? There's just speculation about how it happened, and I'd like to clear that up.
Lainey, all due respect, I'll chat with you tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
And okay.
Okay. I am going to consider that, that you admitted to breaking the isolation, so I'm going to write about that, but we can have a more fulsome conversation tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can just wait to publish until you're actually done my entire interview. That'd be much appreciated.
I can't commit to that, but I can have a conversation with my producer, but that's been something that we've been looking to confirm for a long time, so
Yeah.
We'll
We'll
touch base.
Talk to your producer, yeah, please, and hopefully we can chat tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Ms. Lambering, is the audio clip that we just played, is that Exhibit B to your affidavit that I have been reading?
Yes.
Okay, and at paragraph 5 of your affidavit, you refer to an article, a news article. I'm looking now at Exhibit C to your affidavit, and I'm going to read the news article, and I would like you to confirm that that is the news article that you are referring to as in Exhibit C to your affidavit. I may not read the entire article, but I will read as follows. CBC, S.N.W.T, MLA's broken isolation leads to integrity complaint. Integrity Commissioner looks into code of conduct breaches, conflicts of interest. Linny Lambering, CBC News, posted May 5th, 2021, 6 a.m. Central Time. Last updated May 5. Thereafter appears a picture of Steve Norn with the caption, Steve Norn, MLA, Fortuna Whittley, confirmed to CBC News Tuesday that he broke his isolation period after traveling. And then there's a bracket, Mario De Chuchu, Radio Canada, end of bracket. Paragraph, Northwest Territories MLAs are filing a complaint with the Territories Integrity Commissioner about MLA Steve Norn breaking his isolation period after traveling. Paragraph, MLAs met at a caucus meeting Tuesday morning and issued a statement in the afternoon saying they directed their chair, the Yellowknife North MLA Rylund Johnson, to file the complaint. In a brief conversation with CBC News Tuesday, Norn confirmed he broke his 2-week isolation period after traveling. Quote, yes, I did. I'll wear that. End of quotation marks. He said, quote, if public health wants to do something with that, they can. Absolutely. I'll own it. End of quote. Now, those are the relevant parts of your article that I wish to read into the record. Have I correctly read that portion of your Exhibit C to your affidavit?
Yes, you have.
Okay. Then, Mr. Barclay, those are the questions I have, and I ask that Mr. Cooper has any questions.
That's been marked.
And thank you. I'd like to have Ms. Lambering's affidavit of August 31st, 2021, marked as the next exhibit, which would be
19.
It'll be marked as Exhibit 19. And Ms. Lambering, you're going to now be cross-examined by Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Cooper?
Ms. Lambering, as you probably are aware, I'm Mr. Norn's counsel. And I've listened carefully to the audio recording. Now, first of all, who actually prepared the statutory declaration for you to review and ultimately to affirm?
Lawyers for CBC.
You've been a journalist, or were a journalist as of May of 2021 for roughly how many years?
I've been a journalist since 2016 on a professional level.
And how long have you worked for CBC?
I suspect it's coming up to 3 years.
And at some point during those 3 years, were the journalistic standards and practices of CBC brought to your attention?
Yep.
In what fashion were they brought to your attention? Were you just given a link? Were you given a handbook? How were you informed of these standards and practices?
There is a link available to us. We can find them online. There was also a training module.
Was the training module something that was done online? Was it self-study? Was it classroom? How did that come about?
It's online.
Did you complete that training?
I did.
And I take it as part of your orientation, generally, that the journalistic standards and practices were brought to your attention.
Yes.
Do you recall of those standards and practices as they relate to the recording of interviews of public officials?
Mr. Barclay, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. There's some latitude, obviously, given the administrative nature of this proceeding, but frankly, Ms. Lambrink's journalism is not at issue here, and it's certainly not at issue in the terms of reference. So I can't see the relevance to the proceedings before you.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Well,
Cooper, what relevance is the question that you directed? It doesn't really assist me in respect to the term.
Well, I don't want to go into too much as to alert the witness with respect to what my cross-examination may consist of, because that will undermine its effectiveness. But we are dealing with a recorded interview, which we propose to examine on the basis of whether it met the requirements. And the requirements, again, without going into too much detail, are there for a reason. They're there to achieve certain ends. And the weight that you put on the evidence and your understanding of the comments made by my client, particularly when he gives his side of the story of how this interview came about and the circumstances, are incredibly important. And so the understanding of this reporter as to her obligations and thereafter how she manifested those obligations are important factors in understanding this particularly important piece of evidence, because it is clearly my client's voice on the recording. And he is going to explain to you what actually happened from his perspective. It's obligatory on me, therefore, to put the questions that my client is anticipated to answer in his own defense to the witness in this instance. So it's the recording of the interview that is essential to understand, so that you can understand the evidence that will be subsequently submitted and argument that will derive therefrom.
Doesn't it really go to credibility? I've had the witnesses on the stand now, and then Mr. Norn has an opportunity to testify. I can't really see the what happens at CBC in respect to their directions has been bearing on this matter at all, particularly when we have the recordings, so I'm not going to allow it.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Jenna Mearns, the court reporter, but Mr. Adjudicator, I had a tough time hearing what you were saying just there. Do you mind repeating yourself? Thank you.
Would you like me to repeat the whole decision that I've made, Jenna?
If you could just repeat after, it doesn't really go to credibility. I've had the witness, and then it started to get murky.
Well, I can deal with that. It's that the issue that's being raised is nothing to do with the terms of reference. And in my respectful view, the whole issue of credibility, I will make that decision after I've heard Mr. Norn and I've heard this witness. That's my mandate, but I'm not going to allow this question.
So, sir, just so I understand your ruling on this matter, I'm not permitted to ask any questions with respect to the journalistic integrity of this or other reporters. I'm not allowed to ask whether she follows the rules that govern her behavior, and therefore I'm not allowed to ask any questions.
I think you can ask whether she has followed the rules.
Well, sir, to do that, I need to understand what she knows about the rules in order to determine whether she followed them. If she wasn't properly prepared by her employer, who have adopted a very extensive set of journalistic practice and procedure rules, then the effect of the cross-examination and the credibility that we're testing are impossible. So it's in our submission, it's natural.
The matter is so simple. She's asked a question. Your witness responded, whether she's a court reporter or a lay person. We've got the question. We've got the answer. If Mr. Norn is concerned with the answer, he's got a right to testify. But I don't think getting into all the rules at CBC in this particular case has any relevance at all. So I'm going to not allow you to go down that route.
Okay, so sir, just so I understand the ruling in this regard, I'm not permitted to ask any questions about the journalistic integrity of this reporter. Is that correct, sir? I don't want to correct. I'm not allowed to ask any questions of this reporter.
It's not helpful to me at all. You have to tie it into the terms of reference, and she's asked a rather simple question, and Mr. Norn has replied. I'll have to determine whether it's accurate or not, and dealing with the credibility of both witnesses. But it's not a complicated. In any event, that's my ruling.
Okay, I understand that, but I do have to respond to the suggestion of a simple question. It's not a simple question. She asked a series of questions under questionable circumstances in which her journalistic integrity has to be the subject of cross-examination. Whether it falls within the terms of reference is one matter. It's the credibility of sworn testimony that is now before you. And certainly, sir, we should be, if we're able to do anything at all in this inquiry, is test the credibility of those that are giving you evidence and avoid the appearance, which we certainly are starting to have, that it's just assumed that what this witness and other witnesses are saying is true for the fact that they've said it, sworn it. So what is the point of cross-examination?
We have your client, just a minute. We have your client giving a statement. It's a rather simple statement, which confirms with what the witness testified. I really can't see how complex this is, and my ruling stands, and you go ahead with your cross-examination, but I'm not...
I have no other questions. There's simply no point in asking any other questions given the limitations that the adjudicator has placed on my ability to cross-examine. I simply cannot carry out proper cross-examination function. So I defer to the adjudicator. I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you.
Sir, if I may state for the record, it's already been made clear in Ms. Lamberink's affidavit, but I would also respectfully request, Mr. Barclay, that to the extent that your disposition report references Ms. Lamberink's evidence, it's made clear that such evidence was compelled under subpoena, and that's all I have for you today, sir.
I appreciate that, and all the witnesses have been compelled under subpoena, and that will be reflected in my decision with me.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Barclay, there are no exhibits to be marked separately here. They are all contained within the affidavit or statutory declaration of the deponent. And so those are no re-examination. We're ready to proceed with the next witness. I thank Ms. Lamberink and Ms. Layton for making themselves available today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Sir, before
The
we
next
move on-
witness.
Sorry, Mr. LaPrairie. Before we move on to the next witness, it's incumbent on me to remind you that we had still, this has got nothing to do with you, Ms. Slayton, nothing to do with this witness, or Ms. Lambring. We had advised you, sir, that we were seeking certain subpoenas. We made certain submissions in that regard. The intent, I think, of everybody was to have that matter addressed first thing this morning. That didn't happen. Just seemed to have fallen off the agenda, and I didn't catch it until partway through the evidence this morning. So we certainly wanted to revisit that. We're going to need a couple of minutes, maybe 10 or 15 minutes before we commence with the next.
Mr. Cooper, just on that point, and I appreciated you raising it with me because it's an important application. We waited till we got the transcripts this morning, and we have just read them. We will have a judgment on the subpoenas at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
If I may, on that one issue then, sir, we were going to the transcript ourselves. It was an important point that Mr. LaPrairie had made, if I may ask for the adjudicator's indulgence. The point specifically was on page 84, I think line 22 or 24, in which Mr. LaPrairie protested that the affidavit we got this morning, which I think the news media noted was about an inch thick, which is pretty accurate. We hadn't had a chance to look at that affidavit before Mr. LaPrairie protested that it was something we had seen before. And in fact, now that the evening had given us the opportunity to do so, we looked through that affidavit, and in fact, there's two ways to interpret what Mr. LaPrairie says. He said we had the document previously. We don't know whether we did or not. But the way that it was worded in the transcript, if you look at, what is it, page 84, line? Yeah, so page 84, line 24. The references to the document we already had, but it wasn't in sworn form. I certainly understood that what he meant was that the document was the affidavit, which is clearly not accurate. And I don't believe that Mr. LaPrairie intended that. The affidavit we'd never seen before yesterday morning.
Right.
And so
I'll have, no, you go ahead.
I don't want your decision to be premised on the fact that this was an unsigned affidavit, which sometimes happens. And all we got was a signed affidavit that we had had 2 weeks before. That's not the case. The affidavit that we received yesterday was the first time we had seen that affidavit. It's important because the affidavit is that of the next witness. And so we've had that affidavit for roughly 24 hours, I think. And that has to be a factor for you to consider. The subpoenas, our intention yesterday, as I made clear, was to indicate that we wanted certain subpoenas, but not to complete my submissions in that regard. And certainly if you, sir, have any questions about the necessity of the subpoenas, I suppose now is the time. But just to clarify, 2 of them are with respect to how the COVID protocols are explained, promulgated, enforced, and understood. The other 2 are with respect to the guidance that MLAs have, such that we anticipate submitting would have gone a long ways to mitigate some of the issues that have brought the inquiry to this stage. And it's important that
Cooper, I think you will be pleased with our ruling, and it will save you making further submissions. I'm going to give a fairly detailed judgment, and you will get that at 2 o'clock, but we're going to allow you to get in. So perhaps just wait till you hear my judgment.
Not wanting to be presumptuous, sir, it was incumbent upon me to make all of the submissions I ordinarily would have made, and I will defer on that issue, obviously, given your comments, sir. If we could have a few minutes just to prepare for the next witness. This witness is going to be examined by my colleague, Mr. Halab.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, this witness is live in the committee room. He should be waiting. That is Mr. Dennis Marchiori. He should be coming to testify there. So can we adjourn for 4 minutes and recommence with when he arrives?
Thank you, sir. This hearing is adjourned for 4 minutes.
Just before we start, I'd like to introduce Shauna Sparrow.
And nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to begin by informing you that pursuant to Section 8 of the Public Inquiries Act, you do have the right to object to answer any question under Section 5 of the Canada Evidence Act. The Public Inquiries Act also provides that any witness at an inquiry shall be deemed to have objected to answer any question asked of the witness on the ground that the answer of the witness may tend to incriminate the witness or may tend to establish the liability of the witness to a civil proceeding at the instance of the Crown or of any person. And no answer given by a witness at an inquiry shall be used or be admissible in evidence against the witness in any trial or other proceedings against the witness taking place after the inquiry, other than a prosecution for perjury in the giving of that evidence. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And as we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge that Mr. Marchiori is joined by counsel today, Karen Taylor. Mr. Marchiori, you swore an affidavit on September 14th, 2021. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I'm going to read into the record the contents of that affidavit, and I will have you affirm whether the text is accurate. Affidavit of Dennis Marchiori, sworn September 14th, 2021. I, Dennis Marchiori, of the City of Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, make oath and say, or affirm, I am the Director of Compliance and Enforcement Operations with the Department of Health and Social Services, Government of the Northwest Territories, bracket, GNWT, end of bracket. Given the foregoing, I have personal knowledge of facts and matters hereinafter deposed to, except where so stated to be on information and belief, and where so stated I verily believe the same to be true. 2. Counsel to the Sole Adjudicator has requested I provide an overview of the process for submitting and approving self-isolation plans in the Northwest Territories. 3. The COVID-19 Coordinating Secretariat was established in September 2020 in order to meet requirements under the public health orders related to the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID service operations, bracket, service operations, end of bracket, is a division within the COVID-19 Coordinating Secretariat. COVID service operations is responsible for the operation of Protect N.W.T programs and services. The Office of Protect N.W.T enables individuals to understand and comply with the self-isolation requirements, travel restrictions, and other requirements under the public health orders of the N.W.T. 4. Resident self-isolation plans, bracket SIP or SIPs, end of bracket, are submitted to service operations via an online portal on the Protect N.W.T website. The resident submitting a SIP fills in an online form created by the software Smartsheet. On the SIP form, the resident is required to provide information regarding travel dates, travel locations, as well as the purpose of the trip. Once the individual fills in the required information, the form is submitted online for approval to Service Operations. 5. Service Operations provides approval for SIPs based on public health orders in effect at the time of application. The notice of approval to self-isolate in a designated community, bracket, notice of approval, end of bracket, is a form letter developed by Service Operations. The notice of approval sets out the dates of the days of mandatory self-isolation, including the start date and up to and including the final date of self-isolation. 6. The isolation requirements in the Northwest Territories were adjusted for some travelers depending on vaccination status by way of order dated June 21st, 2021. The public health order relevant to this inquiry is the Public Health Order, Travel Restrictions and Self-Isolation Protocol as amended December 1st, 2020, bracket, the December 1st, 2020 order, end of bracket, which remains in effect. The process described in this affidavit relates to the December 1st, 2020 order. 7. Statistics Canada provides assistance to protect N.W.T. by administering mandatory manual symptom checks on days 2, 6, 10, and 14 of the self-isolation period to ensure symptom checks are completed, bracket, StatsCan symptom check, end of bracket. To complete the StatsCan symptom check, a representative from Statistics Canada contacts the self-isolating resident by phone and completes a form using Smartsheet. On the phone call, the Statistics Canada representative should identify the day of self-isolation as either 2, 6, 10, or 14, and then ask the self-isolating resident if he or she is experiencing the COVID-19 symptoms listed on the form. The StatsCan symptom check form is then sent to Statistics Canada. 8. If the self-isolating resident chooses not to provide information to Statistics Canada, the individual is required to provide mandatory symptom checks to protect N.W.T, either online using a link sent by Protect NYWT or by calling 811 or 1-833-378-8297. The self-isolating resident fills in the online form by indicating whether he or she is experiencing the symptoms listed on the form. The completed form is submitted online to Protect N.W.T. 9. On occasion, the self-isolating resident will provide information to Statistics Canada and fill in the online form with Protect N.W.T. on the same day of self-isolation. 10. Mr. Russell Neudorf, Associate Deputy Minister, Department of Health and Social Services, informs me that on July 14th, 2021, the sole adjudicator for the inquiry regarding Steve Norn, bracket, the inquiry, end of bracket, issued a subpoena directing him to produce the following documents. A. The self-isolation plan filed by Mr. Steve Norn with Protect NWT in April 2021. B. The email or emails from Protect NWT approving Mr. Steve Norn's self-isolation plan. C. Any and all previous self-isolation plan or plans filed by Mr. Steve Norn with Protect NWT. D. Any and all previous emails approving Mr. Steve Norn's self-isolation plan or plans. 11. Karen Taylor, Director of Legal Division, Department of Justice, informs me that on August 3rd, 2021, in response to the subpoena, the GNWT produced the following documents in relation to the self-isolation plan, bracket SIP, end of bracket, filed by Mr. Steve Norn on April 1st, 2021, bracket SIP-41192, end of bracket. A. SIP 41192, Resident Self-Isolation Plan for Mr. Steve Norn. B. Notice of Approval, SIP 41192 for Mr. Steve Norn, dated April 2nd, 2021. C. SIP-41192, April 4 Symptom Check, StatsCan. D. SIP-41192, April 6 Symptom Check, Smartsheet. B. SIP-41192, April 10 Symptom Check, Smartsheet. F. SIP-41192, 41192 April 10 symptom check stats scan. G, SIP-41192 April 14 symptom check stats scan. H, SIP-41192 April 18 symptom check smart sheet. And I, SIP-41192 April 18 symptom check stats scan. 12, a copy of the documents in relation to SIP-41192 are attached to this affidavit and are marked as Exhibit A. 13, the documents in relation to the SIPs filed by Steve Norn on April 1st, 2020 are records kept by the Department of the Northwest Territories COVID-19 Coordinating Secretariat on an ordinary basis. Mr. Marchiori, is this my reading of the text of your affidavit accurate?
I confirm it's accurate.
Thank you. I would like to refer now to some of the documents in Exhibit A, and I would ask if Ms. Anderson could provide Mr. Marchiori with the exhibit book. We're at tab 20 so that he can follow along.
I'm looking it out now.
Thank you. And do those documents in front of you include Exhibit A? There should be approximately 24 pages to Exhibit A. And I'll direct you, there is a page number in the upper right corner.
It's all here. Yes, 24 pages for Appendix A.
Thank you. If I could direct you to page 1 of Exhibit A. And have you confirm that we are looking at SIP archive, it says 2021-0315. If you could affirm that this is in fact the, as noted in the affidavit, SIP-41192, the resident self-isolation plan for Mr. Steve Norn.
That is correct.
Thank you. If I could refer you now to page 6 of Exhibit A. And here we are looking at a document that is entitled Notice of Approval to Self-Isolate in a Designated Community. Could you affirm that this is the Notice of Approval for Steve Norn, dated April 2nd, 2021?
That is correct.
If I could also, I just want to read one portion of that notice. I'm looking at the first paragraph, and it reads, "Thank you for submitting a self-isolation plan, SIP, to protect S.N.W.T. Your SIP has been approved pursuant to paragraph 2 of the Public Health Order respecting travel restrictions and self-isolation protocol. Upon arrival in the Northwest Territories, bracket S.N.W.T, and a bracket, you are required to complete 14 days of mandatory self-isolation in Yellowknife, starting April 4th, 2021, up to and including April 18th, 2021. It is your understanding to ensure you, it is your responsibility to ensure you understand and abide by all conditions set out in your SIP and in the current public health orders." Is my reading of that text correct?
It is very accurate.
Thank you. And if I could get you now to turn to page 11 of Exhibit A. And here we are looking at, I just want you to confirm that this is the STATS-CAN symptom check for Mr. Norn, and this is for isolation check day 2, and this would be April 6th, 2021. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. And if we could turn now just a few pages ahead to page 13. And if I could have you confirm, we are now looking at the symptom check for Mr. Steve Norn. And this is for April 6th. And so this is the symptom check smart sheet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Turning now to page 15 of Exhibit A. Could you confirm that this is the April 10th symptom check smart sheet?
That is correct.
And just a couple more pages ahead to page 17. If you could confirm that this document is the April 10th symptom check STATS-CAN for Mr. Norn.
That is correct.
Thank you. And if we could turn to page 19, if you could confirm that this is the April 14th symptom check STATS-CAN for Mr. Norn.
That is correct.
Thank you. If we could turn to page 21 of Exhibit A. And if you could confirm that this is the April 18th symptom check smart sheet for Mr. Norn.
That is correct.
And finally, if I could get you to turn to page 23 of Exhibit A. And can you confirm that this is the April 18th symptom check STATS-CAN for Mr. Norn?
That is correct.
And if I could just get you to turn back to page 5 of Exhibit A. And if you could confirm that this is the email that enclosed Mr. Norn's approval letter from Protect S.N.W.T. This was sent Friday, April 2nd, 2021 at 7:05 p.m.
That is correct.
Thank you. I would ask to mark this affidavit as the next exhibit, please.
What number is that?
It is Exhibit 20. Yes, this should be
It'd be marked as Exhibit 20.
And I understand that you, Mr. Marchiori, have actually sworn a second affidavit as well. And if, Ms. Anderson, if the affidavit sworn October 4th, 2021 could be provided to Mr. Marchiori. Thank you. And once again, I will read this affidavit into the record, and I would ask you to confirm once I've finished reading it whether my reading of the text is accurate. Affidavit of Dennis Marchiori, sworn October 4th, 2021. Affidavit of Dennis Marchiori. I, Dennis Marchiori, of the City of Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, make oath and say or affirm: 1. I am the Director of Compliance and Enforcement Operations with the Department of Health and Social Services, Government of the Northwest Territories, bracket, S.N.W.T, end of bracket. Given the foregoing, I have personal knowledge of the facts and matters hereinafter deposed to, except where so stated to be on information and belief, and where so stated I verily believe the same to be true. 2. Counsel to the Sole Adjudicator has requested I provide an overview. how symptom checks are conducted in the Northwest Territories during the mandatory period of self-isolation for travelers. This affidavit describes the symptom check process that was in effect in April 2021. 3. Statistics Canada provides assistance to protect N.W.T by administering mandatory manual symptom checks. In April 2021, symptom checks were required on days 2, 6, 10, and 14 of the self-isolation period to ensure symptom checks are completed. Bracket StatsCan symptom check, end of bracket. To complete the StatsCan symptom check, a representative from Statistics Canada contacts the self-isolating resident by phone and completes a form using Smartsheet. 4. The document entitled Guide to COVID-19 Symptom Check for Travelers, bracket, guide, end of bracket, contains a call script for Statistics Canada representatives to follow when conducting symptom checks on day 2, 6, 10, and 14. A copy of the guide is attached to this affidavit and is marked as Exhibit A. 5. The script for day 14 instructs the Statistics Canada representative to advise the self-isolating resident that day 14 is the last day of self-isolation. 6. The guide is a record kept by the Department of Health and Social Services COVID-19 Coordinating Secretariat on an ordinary basis. Is my reading of the text accurate?
Your reading is accurate.
Thank you. If I could refer you to Exhibit A, and specifically, if I could get you to turn to page 26, it's marked at the bottom right-hand corner, page 26 of 52. And I'm just going to read a little bit of the script that is relevant. So starting where it says 1, introduction. Actually, we'll go up to the top of the page where it says day 14, final symptom check. Caller. Hello, my name is, bracket, caller first name, and I'm calling on behalf of the COVID call center, Protect N.W.T. I'm calling to speak with, bracket, contact name, end of bracket, or their parents or guardians if, bracket, contact name, end of bracket, is under the age of 13 years. Bracket, if contact is under the age of 13 years, enter the parent or guardian's information in the proxy field in the spreadsheet, end of bracket. Contact, yes, this is contact name or their parent/guardian. Note, if contact indicates they would prefer to speak in a language other than English, access interpretation services. Caller, hi, contact name. Are you somewhere you can talk about a confidential health matter? Allow contact to relocate if necessary. 1, introduction. Caller, I know you have been through this already, but I'm happy to confirm that today is your 14th day of self-isolation. There are a couple of things I need to let you know about before you conclude self-isolation. This call is for health purposes. For example, this is not a solicitation call. The information collected during this call is collected for the purposes of Section 25 of the Public Health Act. To confirm I'm speaking with the correct person, can you please confirm your child's name and telephone number, adult, full name and date of birth? Contact provides correct name and telephone number. If there are discrepancies or alternatives, record changes in spreadsheet. Caller, thank you. You may have received an email from Protect N.W.T to conduct your day 14 symptom check. I'm wondering if you already completed your symptom check online. Moving now to page 27 of 52. Contact, yes, caller goes to self-isolation questions. Or contact, no. If no, continue per question below. Caller, thanks. I would be happy to conduct your symptom check today to avoid using the online system as an added precaution in support of the public health orders. I am calling today to conduct your day 14 symptom check. Your symptom check is being completed over the phone with me today, rather than online, to ensure that we provide as much support as we can to people that are isolating in the N.W.T. And moving down to symptom assessment. Caller, today is your last day of self-isolation. I want to ask about any symptom you may be experiencing. Can you please let me know if you have any of the following? Review the list of symptoms in the Excel document in MS Teams and document contact's response to each symptom using yes or no. If yes, symptoms are identified, document in the spreadsheet and refer the person to public health for a COVID assessment. Continue with script. Caller, I'm sorry to hear you are not feeling well. Because you are experiencing symptoms, we will ask that you contact your local public health unit/health center to conduct a medical assessment. You will need to remain in self-isolation until further direction is received from public health. If client indicated difficulty breathing, contact 911 and provide client information, and if address is available, provide to dispatch. Caller, if you are an S.N.W.T resident, 18 or older, you are eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine. Are you in Yellowknife? If so, you can contact Protect S.N.W.T by calling 811 and they can book on your behalf. Walk-ins are also accepted between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. in Yellowknife. If not, please contact your local health authority. Number and topic script. Caller, I know that your self-isolation must have been difficult and you are on the final day. Before you end self-isolation, I just want to confirm whether need any supports from within your community that would help you in the final day. Is my reading of those pages correct?
It is accurate.
Thank you. I would like to enter this affidavit as the next.
What is the exhibit number?
Oh, just one moment.
Yeah.
There's the conversation.
We could go back to page 30. I'm just going to continue reading the full script for day 14. There is a little bit more there. So on page 30, script, caller. Okay, we have covered all the items we needed to discuss today, so we can conclude the call. Do you have any other questions that I can help you with? Contact. If yes, refer to Appendix A, frequently asked questions, then continue with the script. If no, continue with the script. Caller, before we end the call, I just want to say thank you for isolating. Do you have any questions before we end our call? Thank you for taking my call today. Take care. Is my reading of page 30 accurate?
It is accurate.
Thank you. And I would now like to mark this affidavit.
It'll be so marked. What is the exhibit?
I believe it is
21.
exhibit.
The exhibit 21.
And those are all of my questions. Thank you.
On cross-examination, it's getting close to 12:30. Would you like to start, Mr. Humphrey?
Let's take a lunch break then.
So we'll take a lunch break now and we'll resume at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
And you can start your cross-examination at 2 o'clock.
After your ruling on the subpoenas?
Subpoenas.
I indicated earlier that you will have my judgment at 2 o'clock.
Okay, so the cross-examination first or your judgment?
Would you prefer that I give the judgment at 2, or did you want to wait until the cross-examination was over? I'll leave it up to counsel. It'll be ready.
Judgment at 2, we can do the cross-examination after that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this hearing is now adjourned until 2 p.m.